possible modulation there. And you can also use the LFOs as step sequencers and all the other stuff. So yeah, it's pretty much all you need to know there. Preference wise, you know, this is going to be more optimization stuff. If you want to see the keys by default, as well as like silencing effect tails. So reverbs, things like that, you can actually stop them. So that's something I turn on as well. And then double click resets controls, or double click typable values. So that gives you two different options there. What that means is I can go and like something here. I can just type that in. That's not on by default. Double click resets. Not exactly working. I'll get it the rest of the way, I guess. But it should, in theory. Okay, so that's really all you need. Sometimes I turn this off, but you know, that's just like a hover over. You know, you definitely want show values when adjusting controls, unless you're just like, you know, I only like feel, bro. I do not want to see a number. So that's fine. All right, so let's kind of get into the hard shit now. Okay, so if you need another reference to all that stuff, it's also in the manual, but I have all the good stuff clipped out here. His manual is a little bit all over the place, no offense to him, but he also left out stuff, you know, like straight up. Like I was going back and referencing things today just to kind of like make sure that this was super accurate. And yeah, he just totally forgot to describe the resample engine. Luckily I know how it works, but yeah, it's just not in here. Anyways, so we're going to talk about oscillator effects to start out here. We kind of brushed into it last week talking about bend and sync. So yeah, so I don't know, like sync is kind of a, you know, confusing thing because it's like, oh, so restart a waveform based on the ending phase of another oscillator. So if the ending phase is happening really fast, it's going to restart really quickly. So then whenever you turn up the sync, it speeds up. So pitches up. Windowed adds a crossfade to that. So I snipped out the you know, actual functions here just so you could see it and kind of like have another reference point without having to open up the manual. Yeah, definitely, like if you're gonna really try to understand how synth works, look into the manual, because you know, literally you cannot understand how to make a wavetable in this synth without looking in the manual. It's really specific, like down to the sample. Like literally it has to be this long in samples, but samples meaning like one of the 44,000. So it needs to be exactly 2048 samples. You couldn't know that without looking in the manual. So that's something that, you know, just keep in mind with other synths. There's a lot of cool new synths out on Splice. You can get the whole kilohertz pack on their site, which is smart of them. So pretty much the same exact price you would pay on Splice, which is $10 a month for all their shit. Definitely worth it. So I'm definitely not going to get into faceplant today. I'm not even going to open it because it's just like, will be a tangent. But after we're done with this, it's kind of like the beginning of faceplant, and more complex and semi-modular synthesis. So we're going to kind of step into like absinthe and a couple other things to kind of like really get ready for 110, which is going to be making a sample library and a sample pack, either or, because you are your own sample pack. It's kind of like the motto you should be keeping. All right, so what's really cool about all of these modes, bend, asymmetrical, flip, mirror, they all have the capability of being created in remap. So remap is pretty interesting because it allows you to remap the actual cycle of the waveform. So what does that mean? It allows you to control the way the synth actually reads the waveform. So when something pinches, in the remapping algorithm, it is looking actually like a pinch. So you pinch the waveform in the remap, and you can create the bend effect. Like if you create both pinch and pull, then it'll create bend plus minus. So it's pretty cool. All right, so definitely keep that open, because we're gonna kind of like just be doing that. Luckily I kind of know how these things work, so I won't have to like go back to it, but I definitely want you guys to kind of like just be looking at this and just kind of trying to internalize what this is actually doing, because we talked about what bend does last week, kind of like referencing massive and using serum a bit. Asymmetrical is almost exactly the same, but when you use bend, the zero crossing does not change. It does not shift. The phase of that zero crossing does not shift at all. Asymmetrical shifts the zero crossing. So it pinches the compression or rarefaction stage by moving the zero crossing. What is the zero crossing? The point where the waveform goes down into its rarefaction stage, the negative cycle. So that is what asymmetrical is doing. And we'll be able to see exactly what that looks like. All right, so now to kind of like get into this. So we saw sync already, so we don't really need to go back into that right now. But bend, exactly what you think. Pinches, bend minus pulls, bend plus minus does both. Pulse width modulation. So kind of like asymmetrical, but it's modulating the zero crossing of the ending phase. So you're going to lose your fundamental, you lose a lot of clarity, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff as well, like how an actual cycle and a window affects an actual waveform's harmonic content. So that is actually kind of the thing you want, hence why this shit's here, asymmetrical. So I just said it shifts to zero crossing, the point where it reaches its negative cycle. That's what it's doing here. So plus pushes it into the compression stage, or to the left, and minus is to the right, to the left, to the right. All right, side to side. All right, left one time. All right. All right, so that's what asymmetrical does. It means one side of the waveform is completely different now, and the size of the compression phase is different, but the ending cycle is not different. So now asymmetrical allows pretty much any waveform to be controlled like a pulse width modulation. So it's actually really cool. So you can actually do both bend plus and asymmetrical in remap. It's a little bit confusing. We're going to talk about that in a second here. But these two are pretty cool. Flip flips the cycle of the waveform. So it actually sounds like a pulse width modulator as well. And if you notice, it kind of creates square wave like shapes depending on, you know, what you actually like put in there. I turned on my phones here, not my actual speakers. It's all good. Yeah, so can assign a modulator to that, make a detune. Sounds pretty cool. Also sounds kind of like phase modulation. So say if you were to modulate that really quickly, take off BPM mode, go up to 100 hertz here. Okay, so would resampling asymmetrical act like a wave shaper where you could gradually increase the output versus input and compress the sound? Kinda, but like say if you were going to like resample into like if you're talking about like resampling into Ableton, yeah, it could kind of shape the wave. So what it is doing is it's definitely shaping the wave because it's changing its readout, but it's not wave shaping. So wave shaping is when you run this through some type of output and it gets crunched into a different shape. So it's kind of like your shape is a circle and you're going through a square hole. And now it's a square. That circle used to be a square. The circle is a sine wave and the square is a hard clip compression. I feel like that's kind of the easiest way to visualize what wave shaping is actually doing. So you can kind of like compress the waveform, but it's not exactly compression. But yeah, so like, I mean, experiment with anything. Okay, so you can do a lot of interesting effects with that. So again, I just put like LFO that was modulating at a high frequency rate that was not sunk to the BPM. So mirror, what it does is it starts the waveform again at the zero crossing, and then it also has asymmetrical plus minus on as well. So this is probably one of the cooler ones. It sounds really cool actually. It makes sounds really nasty pretty quick. Slow up one of my wavetables here. Salmon. So it just kind of like shifts around all the harmonics and kind of flips the phase. So it's actually really interesting. So really cool for like pad sounds as well as like growls and all types of shit. So I really like that one. All right, so let's talk about remap now. So remap. This actual window is the same window that's in our LFO as well as our distortion. Go to X Shaper, edit, same exact window. So X Shaper is a wave shaper. And this you can actually go and redraw this curve in here. So notice as it kind of changes one side at a time, it's actually only modulating one part of the phase and duplicating it. So you can draw in your own wave shapes, dog, and you can draw in two different shapes so you can actually blend in between the two. So it's like a little mini trash. It's kind of sick. All right, so now remap. What does this line mean? Now this is a different line. It's a different line talking about a different thing. This line represents time. And that time is that one waveform. So from 0 to 100%, this whole window here means fill up this. So say if I went and made it go to 100% earlier, so now it's kind of like it's pulse width modulating. So now I'm shifting where the waveform or wavetable ends in the wavetable cycle. If I wanted to go back to 0, I can redraw it back here. Okay, so let me backtrack. What's this line mean again? It means time. It means how long it takes to finish one cycle. So again, if I go to 100%, before the end of the cycle, it'll finish my waveform, So that means if I go and make another cycle that goes to 100%, it'll redraw the waveform twice. All right, so now hotkeys. Right click allows you to do shift key functions. Shift key in any of these grids allows you to pretty much highlight over and create steps. Do that. So that's based on my grid size. So if I wanted to go and redraw 2 cycles, I can go and set the grid to 2. Now I'm controlling 2 different things. So now I have shift key function, ramp down or ramp up. So I can draw on a grid 16 and have it play 16 of one cycle. All right, so now it pitched up. All right, so I'm not sure if anybody really, like, let me know in the chat right now if you're still confused on how this works, because I kind of explained it pretty clear here. So remember, time is 0 to 100%. So if I finish one line from 0 to 100, I redraw the cycle once. So let's flatline this again. All right, so you noticed it kind of like repitching there. So this kind of like leads into like us talking about how to draw a waveform and how to predict the harmonics that are inside of a waveform. Because that's not something people really care about, but that's something I do just as a sound designer, like literally. It's not what every sound designer does, but this is what this one does. So so I like to kind of know what I'm kind of doing to the waveform in order to be calculated with it, because it helps my workflow, it makes me faster, and I, need to be fast, when working under the gun. So I redrew the waveform 16 times, and it repitched and pitched up. All right, so that means that when you draw more than one cycle in one waveform's readout of the original base waveform, which is the wavetable, so more than one cycle and one readout, which this is the window, the readout, where it's actually sourcing this original wavetable or waveform. So if there is more than one cycle in here, it'll start to repitch. So 2 cycles puts it up 1 octave. So this directly correlates with the harmonic series. So when the harmonic series is applied to a waveform, these harmonics are actually put into its overtone series. So if I hard draw 16 cycles, it's pretty much going to pitch it up by a few octaves, probably about 4 octaves. Because remember, 8 in the harmonic series equals plus 3 octaves. And I said it gets chromatic after that and in harmonic, but every multiple of 2. So that means 2, 4, 8. So you times 4 by 2, times 8 by 2, times 16 by 2, 32 by 2. So every time you multiply that, so I guess at the next power, then it goes up 1 octave. So any number in the harmonic series in between those, like, I guess, prime number for the octave ratio, those will be inharmonic and not something that's as easily predicted. That's more stuff you can fine tune and taste, but know that in every multiple like that, you will go up 1 octave. So 16 full cycles means that a ratio of 16, which 8 times 2 equals 16. Ratio of 8 was 3 octaves, so 16 is going to be plus 4 octaves. All right, so I just told you what I was going to tell you, told you, and then told you again. You know, so like let that sink in, you know, because that's kind of like something like if you actually want to know how to, you know, even just use an FM synth, you're going to need to know that. And then you're also going to need to understand how a waveform works, because a lot of people, even sound designers that I know, don't really take that into account, because it's not really necessary for you to go and like make a top 40 track. You don't need to know how like to build a waveform from scratch. But if you really want to like be able to use these effects and then create waveforms from scratch and like really kind of like have some cool foundation to start off on, it's like necessary in order for you to know that. So again, 1 cycle per window equals the fundamental, and I put that in the outline here, and we're actually going to talk about this in a second. That's actually in the wavetable editor section here. So this is going to be something that is like really going to be crucial in order to, you know, really draw your own waveforms and stuff. This is for the importing, but for all these things here, right here. So 1 cycle fundamental, 2 cycles plus 1 octave, C weak 1 notes. So just go look there if you need a reference. It's probably the most clear-cut example that you'll probably find unless you go and map them out yourself, mainly because I've looked them up for a lot of years. I always find those like very crazy scientific documents, so, or just like music theory stuff, and it's really not, you know, off the top of your head when you're working with stuff that actually refers to numbers that are specific. So that's going to really come in handy, especially when doing FM and CRM, because it's not going to tell you anything based on a ratio. In Absinthe, you can go and change the pitch of every oscillator into a ratio, so you actually don't need to know those numbers there. But in here, you do need to know those numbers, because now you're dealing with octaves and semitones. All right, so that's cool. That's going to be the most applicable thing we can go and take into the wavetable like drawing editor. But I was talking about asymmetrical and bend. So if I bend these and shift them like that, then I can bend the readout of both cycles. So pretty much this is what bend and bend plus and minus kind of look like. So I can kind of like end 1 cycle early, or kind of shift the zero crossing. I can even start the cycle early. All right, so you can bend both, or I guess every single curve in the line readout by holding down Option. You do want to finish your cycle so it actually, you know, has some type of phase to it. Okay, so would plus 19 in pitch equal 2 cycles in the base waveform plus 7. All right, so 2 cycles. So think about that. 2. Harmonic series plus 2. So I guess 2 in the harmonic series. The second number is plus 1 octave, 3. That's what you're looking for. So 3 cycles will create an octave and a fifth. 4 cycles, 2 octaves. 5 plus 2 octaves and a major third. 6, 2 octaves and a fifth. 7, 2 octaves and a minor seventh, and 3 octaves at 8. 9 is a major ninth. I really like that one. I like 9. I like plus 3 octaves and 2 semitones. That's one of my favorite ratios to use. Cool. Okay, so that's all really cool stuff. You know, you can do as many different bend effects with remap as you want. So that's bend each line. But you got to remember that 0 to 100 creates 1 full cycle. So if you flatline it like that, it will clip it. Oof. Just like not working. Okay, so if you like that cool thing you just did there and you wanted to go and put that into, dude, get out of here. Okay, so what I was saying is if you want to print this into the wave tail position, up at the top right, you have your render effects. So any warp you do, I believe excluding FM, they might have added it recently where you can actually print FM. Exactly. So you could use the resample feature. So you cannot render FM because it needs an active input. Kind of like why freeze didn't work for a while with drum racks. So you have to render active wave bending type functions. Quantize here hiding at the bottom makes it kind of like bit crushed. You can print that. So if you want to do that, render oscillator A warp. So now wavetail position is your quantize, and you can go and add a different effect here. So that's pretty cool. So it allows you to go and combine effects. So you can use pretty much any level, as many as you want. Especially with like remap and stuff like that, you can get some really interesting effects, especially when you're using like some of the other modes. So I'm gonna have like finish a couple cycles here and bend it a little bit. Alright, so that sounds pretty crazy. So now in remap 2, 3, and 4, it pushes it up a couple octaves. So exactly what I was saying before, how many cycles for the readout. It gives you that basis, so then you can just go and like do some basic bend effects, but now pitch it up a couple octaves. So remember, 4 full bass waveforms, full cycles, and 1 readout equals 2 octaves, because 4 in the harmonic series is plus 2 octaves. 3 would be an octave and a fifth, 19 semitones. So I like this mode a lot. This stuff like is really cool because this is a really unique like warping effects. I haven't really found too many other things that allow you to do these types of effects. Massive allows you to do it, but you don't have this full-on control, nor is this very commonly used. Probably there's some other like tutorials out there for this kind of stuff. Personally, I haven't watched a tutorial in years, but that's just me because I've been doing it for so long. I'm sure there's some good shit out there, especially like Virtual Rider or something like that. But, you know, I'm telling you exactly how it works right now. So, you know, that's really cool. Again, you can render that and then use it again. Now this one's like clipping off right in the middle, so it becomes a square wave right in the middle of it. So I can put an LFO on this, so it gradually modulates over like a bar. Alright, so you can make a lot of really cool sounds with that. You know, and that's kind of it for the oscillator effects. You know, understanding what these do allows you to understand what this does. So, full understanding of this will allow you to utilize these for what they do best, with this, like the basic bend, the basic asymmetrical stuff in there. When I talk a lot, I start to like get all tripped up sometimes. It's all good, dude. Alright, so kind of the final function here, because everything else should be really self-explanatory. You can load some MIDI mapping stuff, some tuning files, some effects racks. You can save your effects chain, load it on Serum Effects that way. And then revert to your save patch. Initialize different things. Copy your oscillators over, kind of like operator. Resample though is pretty interesting, because you can actually say like if you like the way this sounded, but you're like, this is basic. I want to get this crazy shit through the filter into this oscillator quick. So first, the thing you do, if you want to just get this and this possibly into here through this, so the whole single chain as it is, you have to turn off oscillator that you want to go and print it to and get like a really, really unadulterated take on that. So if you have this oscillator on, it will combine this actual waveform with the summed up, you know, everything. So pretty much the way it sums to its own output. So if you want it to be clean, turn off the oscillator. You are resampling 2. So resample 2, oscillator B. Alright, so now I have this new wavetable here, and that's from this output, and pretty much it prints like the perfect length at the perfect note into its own engine, so it gives you kind of like a good take on that. All right, so at every point besides the point where it like just totally offsets its phase for whatever reason, it sounded like this smoothed out waveform through the actual low pass here. And I don't have anything else running on there. But yeah, if I did some type of wave shaping too, say I like that waveform, I like the way it sounds now, I want to actually resample itself back to itself through the wave shaper. Now I can do that. Since it's clipped off, didn't really change that much. But I also didn't have any modulation on there either. So if I put modulation on there, it would have printed that. So that was actually on me for that one. But I can go and try it again, you know. So it's just like something you can try out. You know, you can just try different things. Resample A to B stereo, A plus B. Pretty much takes both of these and prints left and right channel to oscillator A and B. That's why it's called it stereo. So if you had some cool effects with like reverb or something like that, and let's even try that. Let's try reverb plus. Remember, I have to turn off the modulation after as well for it to like really take effect. And I'll put some type of effect on here. Just drop that. All right, so now I'm going to resample A plus B. Okay, so now I have a lot of modulation. Going to take off this. Going to take off my filter as well. Going to take off all the modulation in general. So right click allows you to get to that. Take off this oscillator effect. And also take off the modulator on the wavetable for now. So I want to just get one clean modulator that's going from 0 to 100 over the course of a bar. All right, so there's like a ton of diffusion on that already. Let's pan these left and right. All right, so that's pretty cool. You get a lot of really interesting stuff with that. So remember that it will resample all of its output into oscillator A or B. This has gotten better with each update, really. So again, it's going to resample the perfect note, the perfect length into the wavetable because that's its function. So the function meaning function generator or some type of algorithm that actually triggers it to do one thing all the time. All right, so if anybody has any more like questions on that type of stuff and is either confused or really lost or whatever, you can definitely come back, ask me some questions or throw some questions in the chat. You know, I have chat open a couple different places, so I'm definitely keeping an eye on it. All right, so now let's talk about the wavetable editor. Let's kind of get into this part. So we went through all of this. We talked about warping with, you know, its actual resample and all that stuff. So we kind of went through everything that kind of we'll see in here. All right, so we're going to get into the wavetable editor, and we're going to jump back to the mod matrix as well, just at the end when we start making some more sounds, just so we can keep a clean workflow on talking about wavetables here. Okay, so wavetable importing, or importing audio. You know, stuff's relatively easy, and all these definitions are directly from the manual. If in doubt, try this one first. You know, so you can see all this stuff in the manual if you want to go and double back on that, or go back into the notes or whatever. So really what these are doing are they're giving like Serum a good kind of like foundation to go and look at individual samples and parse them out or cut them up into individual samples. So this scans the audio file and builds a pitch map. So that's able to track the original pitch and snap to the zero crossing. So import normal dynamic pitch zero snap. That is what that is talking about. So I have all these import functions right here whenever I drag any audio file onto the wavetable section in Serum. So import normal dynamic pitch zero snap. This like over described function here by itself. It's like a ton of words in there. That's what throws everybody off. So many words. So it then attempts to locate zero crossings, as I just said. Zero snap, snap to the zero crossing, based on the analyzed pitch. So I actually referenced the wrong one here, but they kind of do the same. What's the difference between these two is that this is following the pitch over time. So we'll try to snap to different wavelengths and create the right size wavetables for that actual pitch. So it actually sounds a little bit more dynamic. So it can actually resize your audio to kind of fit the original audio file. FFT is a more direct version of that. FFT is actually, if you don't have anything to go off of and you really just want to drop it in there and see what happens, that's a good one to go to. Or constant frame size, like Duda says. So why this is a little bit weird. So complex sounds unfortunately don't adhere to having sensible zero crossings. So if you have a ton of modulation like in a bass, then you're really not going to be able to tell what the zero crossing is a lot of the time, mainly because it's clipping out at some points, or the clipping is a really big thing. So like if you don't have defined transients, then it'll be really, really hard to kind of like find where that pitch is. And that's the whole point of me kind of walking you through this tutorial, like in a second here, to kind of like make it actually doable for you. Because this is something that actually took me kind of a little while to like really implement into my workflow. But it is the best way to say, like, if you do have virtual rights wavetables, to make wavetables like that, as good as that. It's not about using those wavetables. You know, it's about being able to create that shit at that high level for yourself. So, you know, this stuff you can just import and see what happens, but you're going to have a lot of weird issues if you're not kind of like adhering to these guidelines, which is literally native to his engine. This is not like universal stuff anymore. This is really just Serum right here. Okay, so import normal dynamic pitch follow again. This will also build a pitch map, import a varying size segment of audio for each subtable. So like I just said, it will follow the pitch and try to create the perfect size, you know, to fit that fundamental frequency. just like I was talking about with, how does a fundamental frequency fit in one window? Where is that defined? The base waveform, how does that dictate what the original sound is and stuff like that? So that's something that's pretty important to know, just so you know, like, all right, well, this is a flute sound, so I kind of want to import this flute, but it has a little modulation. But the flute's good because the flute doesn't have a ton of like reverb or whatever, and it's also a flute, so it's a really, really defined fundamental at a very high pitch. So the high pitches are easier for algorithms to actually find or get confused by. Like if it's moving really fast, but there's also tones under it, it might go all over the place. So it needs to be one really defined fundamental. So things like Melodyne, they can actually read polyphony. So they can separate multiple fundamentals into multiple notes and then key track those things. So unlike the above, pitch follow import does not attempt to locate zero crossings. That's really banking on the fact that the pitch is defined. So again, this is for things with defined transients because it's looking for a zero crossing. If it's clipped out, no bueno. But if it's like a break, this is a good one. Dynamic pitch. So you can have like the undertone of a sub or something, and that can also be found, as well as adhering to that original transient of the kick that the sub is coming from. Okay, so import constant frame size pitch averaging. So it looks at the entire that's a great place to just highlight. So actually it's distracting. All right, so import constant frame size pitch average looks at the entire audio file and then creates that kind of like tuner, like, oh, it's kind of there, but this is what we're just going to average it at. So if it's around C, it's just going to say C. So what does that mean? Typically, this is the best choice when a sound has a fixed frequency, such as a one-shot from a synthesizer. In other words, you hear it as perfect or near constant pitch with no pitch bend or vibrato to speak of. In this mode, Serum will analyze the entire file for an average pitch. Just as I said, look at the entire file, average out the pitch, because some sounds contain half cycles, silence, multiple notes, among other artifacts. Serum might not guess the desired pitch. Fortunately, Serum will display the number of samples it is using per frame in the wavetable editor formula area. So this is where we're going to talk about the basic formula parser kind of like info. And that's like, if we're going to get to the 301 level on this, like being able to predict wavetables from typing in a formula, has it all in the manual for every single function. It's actually kind of fun. But, I mean, if you find that fun, I don't know, man. You're in my class. You want to learn this shit? I don't know. All right, so advanced import, constant frame size. So this is where I'm talking about the actual formula parser. So you can import and create a sample, like say, let's just actually make one right now. Serum. So there's an algorithm called ICANN has kick. So if I click in here, or something like that, some kind of kick thing. Oh yeah, this one. This is the one. So this is an algorithm. So all these represent something. 32. That's a number that I recognize. 16 times 2. So that's calculating all that. If I modulate through it with my wavetable LFO, All right, so now we're designing a kick drum from its built-in formula parser here. So that's literally a preset. It can go and try different numbers out. Like I was saying, like put in 16 here. That changes the octave range. Really simple shit. I'm not gonna go too much deeper on that just because I don't want to like drain you too much. I know that shit's fucking ridiculous. So there's a lot of cool stuff to try out. All of these things give you algorithms, numbers to type around. 0.1, fuck it. 0.2, dude. Screw it. 512, 2048. Fuck it. Oh, website typed a letter in there. Cannot type in G. Can't put G in where it should be a number. Alright, let me reset this. Alright, so that's pretty cool. The formula parser is really interesting. It's really interesting to go and try out. So I just want to talk about the FFT here, and then we're going to start importing stuff. So FFT is Fourier transforms, what it stands for. Higher resolutions, higher fidelity. FFT, this is kind of talking about bin plus time. It's kind of like talking about samples plus bin information. All right, so unlike other import modes, which are import and divide, possibly stretch chunks of the original waveform, the FFT modes are a spectral import. In other words, these import modes divide the source audio into snippets of time and analyze the spectral content. So exactly what I was saying, using its own engine to convert analog information to digital, so A to D conversion. So 256 is talking about 256 samples in time. 2048 is talking about 2048 samples in time. So there's a couple numbers to kind of go to in order to calculate these things. So Serum internally uses 2048 samples for each single cycle. This makes 2048 the ideal number of samples to use as a wave cycle. If you plan generating sounds from synthesizers, vocoder, etc., because no resampling of the source audio will be needed, this 2048 samples per cycle works out to 46 hertz at 96K, or F sharp 0 plus 24 cents. So what does that mean? That means that if you sample at those specifications, it will import into Serum perfectly, because you're actually calculating the perfect number of samples. So higher resolution, higher fidelity. 96K is a good number to start from, but you don't have to do that. And that's kind of like the point of having that other exercise here. This is probably the most pointless one. I included it because it's not pointless. You can do a lot of stuff with it. But what you do is you include a text file, and that executes this wavetable to kind of parse itself out and create a formula. And it does a bunch of stuff. So, you know, everything like just a text doc can go and tell Serum to do something. Yeah, so like Serum has an insane engine, like insane. That's why like I've made the comparison to Kima and like Reactor and Max. I don't think it's on that par with spectral type of waveguide synthesis stuff with like say like physical modeling, and stuff that like super high-end spectral stuff is really good for. But it is definitely the consumer version of that, like at a super high level. And if you do it for anything that's not just rhythm bass, you can get some really cool shit out of it. All right, so before we get into this, I'm actually doing pretty decent on time right now. because I was about to go into like phase plant. I was like, no, that'll be too much. Why is... Oh, okay. All right, so now I'm going to import some samples, and we're going to just kind of work with it like that. And now we're going to kind of work with the FFT bin engine here for a bit. So again, bin means partial. I can draw in any of these, and they stand for sine waves. So if you only draw in the fundamental, which is the first one, you get a perfect sine wave. There's some rogue harmonics around here floating. It's that aliasing. But yeah, that's how that works. So go and draw it in exactly like operator. Operator has 64 partials. This has 512. So that's a lot more. Hence why people say Serum sounds digital. Because if you right click in here and go and do one of these things, any of these functions, you can go and randomize your low bins up to 64, randomize all of them, or create a random series of gaps, a progressive fade, low pass, high pass, shift an octave up, draw, which these two are what operator can do, or you can generate a saw. So like I can generate a saw here that has 512 partials. It's gonna really sound really sparkly. So if I right click and draw even harmonics only, I can make a square wave by just literally scanning through it and just taking out all the harmonics. Come on, man. Get out of there. Alright, so a big old square wave. So if like I'm trying to make a square wave type wavetable or something and I want a good basis to start on, I will go and do this. And then I will go and duplicate it over, start drawing stuff. Start from that, duplicate it again. You know, so I have a bunch of different options here. Okay, so you can right click again, low pass filter, high pass filter, or I guess high cut. That's really what that's talking about there. So it lowers the resolution. So again, more partials, more processing. Randomize. Or you can make a saw and then create a random series of gaps. In order to draw fundamental, you have to be able to draw the odd harmonics because 1 is odd. Okay, so that's all the bin functions here, how those work. Okay, so what's really cool is that when you're importing audio, just as I was just talking about, let's get some North Boy drums. Nope, nothing in there. Probably something in there. Alright, so say I'm gonna drop a snare, which, you know, I can drop it and then have the algorithm crunch it down, or I can drop it into an individual wavetable. So now the full snare sample is occupying 1 window size. So this is now the original, I guess, harmonic series for this sound, but just one cycle. It's really clicky. Okay, so now this little button right here, this pretty much A to D converts this. So we talked about the Nyquist theorem and how that works, and pretty much you need to calculate analog information twice its own resolution in order to accurately reproduce it. So it's pretty cool to do that. Then you can draw new waveforms and fill in you know, gaps that you may have in the waveform. So you're looking for like some really crazy overtones for a square wave, something like that. You can go and drop in like any type of sample. It doesn't need to be a snare. It can be anything. Yeah, it can be a full-on break, you know, even in just one sample. Do the same thing. So it calculates it like that and just drops it in there. So let's kind of backtrack here and import something for real. So 160 dynamic pitch zero snap. This is going to be for my, I guess just my my first couple waveforms in this. Just because it's so long that I actually can't read it very well. So you hear all those like clicks and pops. That's what I was talking about, where it's gonna kind of like be weird if there's any room in the actual sound. But you can hear it. You can hear that it still sounds like a drum. So it still has its transient definition. It's still being separated correctly. It's just got a little room in it, so you can hear some clicks and pops. But you play faster, then it's going to be a little bit cleaner. All right, so now when I import something, we can process it and do all types of stuff to it. Really the big thing to know for just right now is morph. So morph is pretty cool because it allows me to blend between my wavetables, and these are, you know, pretty much native to each wavetable synth. They have a specific way they're doing it. Maelstrom was one of the first, I guess, granular wavetables. So it was able to do like everything can do like wavetable, I guess, resynthesis kind of stuff, which is sample and hold, one window size, allowing you to actually crossfade, only crossfading. So Serum kind of combines granular as well with spectral resynthesis, and so does Maelstrom. So Maelstrom in Reason, you know, like really kind of started that with a lot of stuff, and you can really find a lot of like crazy sounds out of that. All right, could editing partials be used as a way to mix? Like instead of processing or EQing, you could go back in and remove certain partials that correspond to your muddy harmonics. In certain times, it's kind of hard to go and like, I never go and do stuff like that just because, you know, when I'm mixing, I can go and do that type of subtractive EQ by hand. Like say if I need to eliminate certain partials. If something is really, really harsh though, that's when you go and eliminate it. Like say if there was like 3.2 kilohertz, which is probably the shrillest range, which is like around here or so. Also native to whatever note that you're playing, so it's really hard to go and eliminate specific frequencies and stuff. But yeah, you can, you know, kind of like cut out stuff. Like say if you're having a problem with like your low mid range with subs, that's literally part of when like my design process with a sub is I'm putting in extra harmonics to go and run into a wave shaper and generate second order harmonics. So I'm trying to create like a whole frequency range of 2 sine waves that both get resonated with the pitch envelope, as well as have some type of release between a couple different oscillators. But normally on my sub basses, there is a few different sine waves harmonizing with each other. And that usually is around 3 and 5, because I really like sawtooth subs, kind of like Moogs. So that's kind of where I come from with it. But I also like square subs as well. Just really what I'm trying to go for at the time. I like really heavy and like sawtooth based subs for anything hip hop. And then for like house or like drum and bass or something where there's going to be a lot of low end, and I need that low end to be open so I can put a lot of mid bass stuff in there, I usually go with like a square wave bass sub, which is you know, usually either FM at a ratio of 2 from modulator carrier, or I put a ratio of 2 as a parallel additive sine wave, just 1 octave up. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can talk about subs. Okay, so and I think it might have been you. There was somebody who was asking about subs specifically, and that's something definitely, you know, people just don't kind of like really take into account, like how does a sub work, and how does, like, you know, like if you go and that was one of the reasons why I threw you guys that you know, 808 Warfare stuff. It's extremely good example of like how to make like a Dirty South sub. Like, I don't think most people know how to make a Dirty South sub. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. Because, like, I don't know if you know that overtone. It's not, like, natural right when you throw it into a you know, saturator. I'm sure a lot of people have kind of figured that out. You know, and then you can just go and get that sample that's already doing that, throw it through a saturator or whatever, and just really blow it up. Or you can make it from scratch. Make it from scratch gives you a lot more options to do stuff. All right, so we talked about a couple of these already. Let's go and import something a little bit more melodic. Let's go with the bass sound. All right, so this dynamic pitch follow, mainly because it's a really defined pitch. So notice as it sounds really clicky and poppy. Also, I need to put some type of modulator on here. That's something you must do. So I was talking about clicky and poppy, morph, crossfade, or spectral on this. So when you're using these two functions, it's really so you can shift the zero crossing to the fundamental phase, because these zero crossings are based off of this, you know, overall waveform. You definitely don't want to offset those. So these will actually change the way the wavetables are lined up internally as well. So if you're just hearing clicks and pops and you just want to smooth that out, crossfade's a good place to start. So again, so what's really happening here is we're having like this offset. You see that? This offset really fucks everything up because that is not zero. Anytime you see something go off the waveform like that, it is not at zero. So that leads me into my next thing, which is like processing. So single is for one individual wavetable. Process does it for all of them. So batch processing. So you can go and crossfade each wavetable individually by doing it at grid size, crossfade at edges by 16 samples. So 16 samples is a really good one to use. That's usually what I do if I hear any clicks and pops and I want to kind of even it out. Another thing I do is set it to sync window full, because that adds a actual crossfade in it by default. All right, so, you know, in the manual as well, it will say like Serum is not a sampler, and it's not. The only thing that's a sampler is the noise oscillator. And we talked about this last week. Extremely basic. Make your own folder. That's the only thing you should somewhat be confused on. That's all where your presets are. So you just make a new folder in there and then you're good. Just drop samples. That's the only thing that's a sampler in here. But you can kind of like make sure that your zero crossings line up so you can kind of recreate your sound. So, I mean, if you're trying to recreate something, you definitely have to add things that, you know, would kind of be on the sound. So if it was kind of like a bass, it would have some type of like pluck maybe on like a darker part, which would be a low pass. So that's like the mid-range tone. Now you can just add sub. All right, so it's super easy. Again, dynamic pitch follow for single notes. This is probably not the best one, but yeah, you can import all types of stuff. Doesn't need to be like a pure, like, synthesized tone. Say if I want to drop something like this in now, just some like Reese shit. Sine compression is Bay. Oh shit, this is an MP3. Totally forgot. I accidentally converted these. And then I lost the originals. All good. So I processed the shit out of them. And I can drag them in from here. So again, this is the easiest one for trying to start from something. Let's go. Oh, it's just crunching it down right now. So yeah, that's definitely like if you're importing like a bigger one, it's a good place to start. Okay, so that made it in. All right, so it sounds pretty crazy, a little too crazy. It sounds really clicky and poppy as well. So that means the phases are off. So I'm gonna morph spectrally on this one. And if you didn't notice, it kind of shifted around some of the wavetables. So again, we can go back in here, process all, and then crossfade 16 samples. If that doesn't do the trick, I can go and dial it in based off my grid size. All right, so that sounds cool, like right about there. All right, so that was, again, spectral morphing at constant frame size. Is a good way to just go and drop in samples. But again, I had to do a little bit of morphing to it. So it sounds decent, but on this one, I'm actually going to change my grid size. Going to go pretty high because what I want to do is I want to clip off this little piece right here. This little guy on every single wavetable more than likely is offset. So I set my grid size to kind of like focus on that. And then this is going to change kind of the amplitude of the fade. So I'm going to do that process. Now fade edges, cross fade edges at grid size. Alright, literally like a ton of sounds in there. all based off this original resample that I have. So it's really cool. You know, like Frequent is probably one of the few people that I've kind of been following for a while, just in terms of like kind of like neuro sound design and stuff, just because he's like just a huge enthusiast of sine compression, and I just really love sine compression shit. This one is also really, really gnarly. Okay, so on this one, I actually want to go and do that tutorial I was talking about. Literally, this takes about 2 seconds to do once you understand what's going on. And we kind of like touched on a lot of this stuff now. We're about to like jump into this to kind of end it off. But yeah, so just looking for this page number here. I think it's about 40. That's in my... Okay. Import tutorial. Creating a sound specifically to import into Serum. Alright, so I'm going to do this from a live synth just to kind of like make it really, really clear that this is, you know, the way to do it. So it doesn't actually need to be super specific. If you want it to be perfectly accurate down to the sample, you follow these notes to the exact letter. Pretty much you need this to actually line up, just because if it's offset by anything, any amount sample wise, then it's actually going to change the offset of the zero crossings. So you just need them to line up pretty much. So what that means is you play an F1 note and then you change the BPM to 165. And I believe it says it in here. So you can do fine tuning at one note, so semitone, and tune it down by, 22. And then you play that note, resample it, drag it into Serum, and it should be fine. All right, so again, that's a tempo of 165, 8 bars. So at a tempo of 165 for 8 bars, you can take a sample of that, and that will equal 2048 samples based off of this, based off what it's telling you. So yeah, it's really, really straightforward once you kind of like check out some of these functions here. All right, so now I'm going to go and do that. It's going to be a little bit hard with like these resamples just because I don't have a defined pitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and use Serum. Okay, so now in Serum here, I'm going to load up a patch. Something that's kind of straightforward, relatively straightforward. Sounds good. I kind of want something that's a little bit right, so I'm gonna use this one. Actually, you know what? I think I'm gonna do one with a little bit more movement in it, because this actually sounds really cool. This one is a very moving patch. So the pitch is moving a lot in this one too. What's important is that the fundamental, or the sub, is probably, or is the most defined thing in the actual waveform. All right, so now follow the directions. F -1. And we hold that note for 8 bars. So this is going to be our sample. All right, so I can freeze it, flatten it, import. I like to consolidate before I import stuff, just so I know that it is going to be that length. Okay, so now back to the tutorial. What it says in that tutorial is that if you go and type in 2048, that Serum is going to look for that amount of samples, and it's going to calculate negative F1 minus 22 cents. So, you know, I'm a little bit off here. I didn't actually do the pitch bend thing. So let's hear how that sounds just with that. I can go and tune this down by, you know, I think it's 22 cents. So I could do that. So let's do 2 versions. One that's retuned. We'll do a Complex Pro. There's a lot of harmonics. Let's hear that. And then no warping on this guy. All right, so that's chill, and keep that like that. I'm going to consolidate this one too. I'm actually going to make another Serum just so we can hear both versions. Okay, so I typed in 2048. Now it's saying split at 2048, 22 hertz, F -1 minus 22. So all those numbers I just said are here now inside the synth, just like I said. And now it's saying only one thing. Serum only wants one thing, yo. And that's F -1 fucking minus 22 cents, dude. Fucking typical. All right. All right, so now I'm gonna do what I was doing on these other ones. So remember, there was a lot of like movement on this sound, so I do kind of have to have it like slow on the modulation so it didn't sound like super squirgly. So that's really, really close to what it sounded like before. Too close, bro. So I want to get rid of those clicks and pops again. So just cleaning it up. That's the point of knowing these things. And that's mostly the function of it. If it's, you know, modulating its pitch at all. And this is why I'm showing you this as opposed to like a perfect one. Because, you know, I don't think designing the perfect thing for Serum, that's creative. I want to design the perfect thing for me, not for Serum. Don't tell me what to do. So like that's if you have your sub note defined, it's going to create this bass waveform that is the length that it wants. So kind of see it, it's a little bit offset. So now I can morph in a couple different ways. I can morph spectral, which really doesn't change that much. Or I can morph, and we'll take off remove morph tables. So also note that whenever you create a wavetable like this, it will fill in pretty much all of the slots. So morph tables allow you to create new wavetables to morph in between these fake wavetables. So now I can morph spectrally, and if I put sub into each wavetable, I can zero, or I can move the zero crossing to the fundamentals phase, or I can morph spectrally 0 to every phase. So that means if this is the kind of base waveform, then it will shift to that. But it's not as clean. Alright, so then after you do that, though, there's no going back. So you do have to like re-import, because it goes and processes each sample. Alright, so re-import 2048. It already knew that. Whoops. So again, so I can just crossfade on this, and it should be kind of cool. Should be kind of good on that. Almost. So what am I going to do again is crossfade at 16 to my grid size, depending on how you want it. And this is also part of that tutorial. Alright, so now I'm going to try spectral morphing to the fundamental phase. So it didn't really change it too much, but it is kind of cleaning it up. So I can clean it up again by adding the window. Alright, so trigger, again, triggers it to start whenever I hit the note. And then want to crossfade and make sure your zero crossings are fine. Yeah, good question. How does the window clean it up again? Visually, you can see it. So remember, any offset at the beginning or end is a discrepancy in the zero crossing. So with the full window on, it actually crossfades for you. So in the process here, I'm really just offsetting and fading at the grid size. So say if I want to grab this whole end here, you know, I can literally focus in using my grid size. And then I can go and do that again, crossfade edges at grid size. So this is going to be limited to the resolution of, 256 different snapshots. So again, not a sampler, resynthesizer. Pitch and time are disconnected. This is technically granular. So this is really, really, really sick though when you use it as a modulator with FM. Obviously these are pretty self-explanatory. AM and RM talking about the same thing, different types of routes. AM modulates the amplitude, while ring modulation creates a feedback loop. So FM, patch that in. right, so literally anything you want can put in there. So let's try dropping this one in. And this one's not kind of like fine-tuned, I guess, or tuned down at all. So again, type in 2048, drop that in here, and then I mean, it's just about the same. So they're really, really similar. All right, so that's really the best way to go and create a sample for import. So let's go and try that one more time, say with like something that's not as resonant. So again, that's, and I'm showing this like 3 or 4 different times in a few different ways. So, at the end of this, you really shouldn't have any excuse on why you don't kind of like have an example to kind of go off of. So like I'm going to load up another kind of patch in here, and let's see. Alright, so that one sounds pretty tight, just as like a low web. So I'm gonna try to like pitch this down by about 22, so around 200. So 22, 0 to 1, so this should be 100 cents. I'm gonna slow this down to alright, so now we print, freeze, flatten, consolidate, 8 bars. So like if you're just going through making a bunch of patches, it's a really, really clean cut process. So you can just kind of like try it out with anything. And it's really just a couple different numbers you have to type in and know. So this actually looks pretty good. Really close to the way it probably should look. Alright, yeah, that's pretty good. Alright, so now it needs to be cleaned up again. So I'm going to try morph the fundamental phase. Almost. So I do want to hear it kind of like soft. So I'm going to focus on this end point again. Let's go about here. So I want to find this point right when this hits 0, and that's fine if there's any other points where that's kind of shaving off stuff. Let's try fade. So it's a more hard fade. It's not as gentle as a crossfade. Cool. All right, so now let's assign modulation. Make it play back. Alright, so that's pretty cool because it's a whole patch in one wavetable now. I can go and try that as a modulator in an FM patch now and see how that kind of affects things. Put it up at an octave. So it sounds like a crazy patch, but literally it's just a wavetable right now. So you can try that. It's a really, really simple process. I just did it like 4 or 5 times. And then you can try oscillator effect. Alright, so there's a ton of possibilities you can do with this before I go in on this sound. But yeah, hopefully that like kind of opens up your mind to just being able to digest what's going on in Serum, because there's like a ton of shit going on. And I'm sure nobody's kind of like painted it that clear for you on how to import samples. You know, so it's literally, it literally should take though, like, oh shit, this patch is sick. And then you go and change it, print it, drop it, and it's done. Literally within like five minutes. You know, so like once you get that process down and just kind of commit some of those numbers to memory, which you should be doing with a lot of shit, you know, really you have to kind of like just internalize some of this stuff. And we went through a lot of these different menu items here, just to kind of start with it. But to kind of like end out the class today, we're gonna kind of like talk about creating a wavetable inside of the actual engine here. So what's cool is that I've been talking about the actual construction of a waveform this whole time. So now when I say, if I draw 32 sine waves, so if I set this grid size to 1, it'll draw a sine wave at full amplitude. So that means it'll put it up 5 octaves. So then I can put 5, or I guess 8 cycles in one part of the waveform. And then maybe I'll put 16 on the other side. Or maybe let's actually put 8 on the other side, so offset it. Or just 4. So now I can throw this up into here. Say I want to add the fundamental. Now I can push that here, working with pure harmonics. So you might notice that this is offset. Say I duplicate it a couple times, do a couple things to this, do a couple things to that, put a couple weird things in there. Maybe put in another sine wave, get a little bit more resolution. Even shave off some areas. Okay, so now that these are offset, you can see them offset. Now I can go, because these are already in the partial bank, when I hit 0 fundamental phase, it'll automatically create the perfect wavetable. All right, so really, really simple. So let's kind of backtrack here again, go back to the other one. So we have all these, you know, shape selectors. So we can nudge things. So I can nudge this line based on my grid size. This is a nudge. We have a noise generator. Click and drag. So you see this little counter in the grid. That is your amplitude for the noise. So I can go and put noise into all these little parts and create these little tiny iterations or resonant harmonic points. You can add noise to this entire wavetable. So noise is cool because it will follow your line. based on your amplitude. The amplitude setting, remember, up and down drag. So I can go and scan through this and kind of like add a little fuzz. It's, if you're a Photoshop person at all, it should be just like painting using Photoshop and, you know, adding texture to something, because texture in a digital medium, it's kind of hard to create like an organic flavor to it. So you kind of have to like know your tool super well and then just start to like throw that tool all over the place. So you really have to be able to kind of like understand like, oh, amplitude is up and down. I can highlight anywhere and I can scan through the wavetable and create this. And go create a new wavetable, have a starting position, generate a saw with these overtones. Let's clear all, generate saw. So now I have a fresh saw to work with. So again, grid size changes resolution of tool. I can draw a little sine wave, and then after I draw the little sine wave, so if there's 64 little sine waves in here, that creates harmonics. So that's going to create a high pitch inside of here. And I can smooth those out. So this is a linear smoothing tool. This is the curve-based smoothing tool. So you can smooth off your actual zero crossings with this. You can nudge things more towards the zero crossing and then smooth to that. Say this is offset. Like, hey man, what are you doing? Get out of here. So single now allows me to go and process this. So shift horizontal to zero crossing. Yay, you did it. And now I can again fade to that point, get a little bit more resolution, maybe fade up a little bit more. That's a little too much. So I want to undo that. We'll undo, copy, paste, plus, minus, subtracts, adds. So again, I'm going to nudge this up to the zero crossing here. And then I'm going to smooth it. Almost there. So now I can go in single process, crossfade edges, grid size. That's pretty smooth. So you can add overtones, draw on stuff that's random, start to create smoothing. So it's really cool to have all these shapes because you can start to generate harmonics. You know, again, grid size will actually change your harmonic series. That's really cool. Changing your amplitude grid allows you to create bigger changes with your grid tool. So I want to create that kind of curve right here on the other side. And then I'm going to go smooth that. Oops, it's a little bit too much on that. So again, can nudge. And remember back to life cycle of a waveform. You want your compression and refraction stages to have some type of order to them. So increments of 2 to 4, so to the power of 2. That's what you kind of want to work in. So more resolution here, but it's always going to be in, you know, the power of 2. So all those high frequencies just went away. So again, larger amplitude grid, more amplitude on the draw tool. Larger grid, lower frequency. So I can set it to 1 here, just draw a straight up sine wave. So I do want at least 1 and 2. Now I just made a sine wave with just the tool. And I can split it into sections, draw little sine waves there, add resolution to the grid, smooth in between those points. So Zebra does do this to Biridim's beats. It does, but it's not as clean. And you can do a lot of stuff with this. Yeah, pretty much Dosu. So it's like it becomes inharmonic at that point. But you know, if you go into like 3, you know, 5 and anything like that, that's when you go and create inharmonic sounds. So you can create to that exact point, just to that exact point. So say if I have a sawtooth I make in here, which is just a line, a downward facing line. Let's give it some amplitude here. Split it, actually. Boom, sawtooth. Of course. So, you know, I'm literally using Serum like Photoshop right now. And I've done this in a ton of different synths. I really like Absence, Wavetable Designer, Waldorf Nave. Zebra is also a really good one for a lot of physical modeling stuff. Zebra just tries to do too much, you know? And I've made so many different patches with Zebra, especially with like the MIDI Fighter 3D and all this crazy XY shit. So the XYs in Zebra are my favorite thing, and the modular patch bay. Really a different synth though. So I actually want to get into Zebra in this along with like Reactor stuff because it is a modular synth. And Hans Zimmer actually uses that as kind of like his main kind of like thing that he wants things sound designed in, and had a whole library made with just Zebra for Dark Knight on all of his shit. So it's a really cool thing. So pretty much what I was about to say was, say if you have this in an increment of 3, which was, I want a full cycle to finish in an increment of 3. So that means I gotta split this into 6. 6. 3. Let's go to basic shapes here, so we can just hear our basic sawtooth and harmonize it. Same note. Theory checks out. So literally is the harmonic series. If you know the harmonic series, you know how to make this. So now I can offset this. I want this to be an increment of 2 here. I can actually add 3 cycles to one part of the waveform and then add 5 cycles to the other side. So I can make like 2 overall waveforms. Say if I wanted to do that. So do that. I calculate the harmonic series, A to D convert it. Now I want to add a fundamental. So I'm going to crossfade, and I'm going to do it spectrally for now. So notice as it changed the number of wavetables, it says 1 to 256 now. So now we got ghost table. So I'm adding sub into this literal harmonized chord I just drew. So you can control the pitch of your waveform by drawing in things that coincide to the harmonic series. So if I draw 8 iterations, or this would be 4. This would be up 2 octaves. Alright, so say I want to combine this theory with a couple other things. So I'll have 1 octave here, and then try to split this other half into something else. So 14 will allow me to create 4 iterations, or 3.5. Let's actually go 15, 16. Okay, so let's backtrack again, drawing in harmonics here. So 16 separates this into 16 iterations. So I want to split this in half. Let's go to 8. So literally 2 different octaves, and I just drew in those harmonics. The power, the absolute power. Alright, so then you can shave all that down, you know, as you see fit. Let's undo that. Let's redo that. So let me add amplitude curves, resolution, shave it, clean it up. As I shave it down, I clear out upper end harmonics. Alright, so why is this super sick to do? Well, let's go back to the stacking engine. I can go and change the harmonic series unisono effects. And it creates like a chord within a chord. Let's make this mono, have it always bend. Maybe make this whole big chord stab. And this is how you make future house stabs and shit. And like when I design future house sounds are probably one of the most interesting sounds to make and hardest, to be honest. I had an easier time figuring out how to make a growl bass than I did a chami pluck. So remember, you want to morph in order to get it to blend. So I really like doing this shit for like liquid drum and bass, for really vibey halftime shit. I mean, you probably know. And then going and sending that in as an FM modulator is also really sick. So obviously you kind of see where I'm talking about those future house kind of sounds. So really, really harmonic and like big sounds. So you know, you can inject like the sound of a chord into one waveform super easily by utilizing the harmonic series knowledge, because it all coincides. So, I mean, that should kind of cover how this works. I mean, remember smoothing effects here, linear smoothing or curve-based smoothing. Linear is going to be harsher, smoother is going to be, you know, or the rounded curved edges are going to be nice and clean and gonna sound pretty much not resonant or harmonic or things like that. Yeah, so like pretty much everything else in here, you know, is really not super important to you know, use all the time, but they're really, really specific on what they do. So say like we talked about what DC offset does, and that offsets the zero crossing of like the fundamental phase. So it will move it up and down, so it will actually kind of be at the correct phase. And so this is single, you know, so I can go and take DC offset off for all of them. And so I just hit all, and now I create all these tables because of the fact that I have it on morph. So now it just did all the morph tables. It just removed the DC offset and created new morph tables for that. So, you know, literally, it means what it's saying. Phase invert, flip, horizontal, move it horizontal, crossfade the edges. I got you. Filter at the grid size? No problem, dog. Sample reduction at grid size? Sure, why not? Remove the fundamental? Why not? Resize tables to be half, so half, 2 times the total number, and just sum them up into themselves. You can do that. You can literally go and take like the original wavetable and just like screw it up. These are like it's like a modular FM wavetable set. I actually gave this one out. It's really good. Resize tables to be double, half total number. So it combines the wavetables together into the same wavetable. This shit just got loud. Why not play Sweet Shop? Sweet Shop. So that's a really easy way to make like a future house stab and all types of liquid drum bass sounds, all types of rhythm sounds. Just really, really resonant shit. People are just like, oh, chord, that's too fucking nice for me. I'm trying to make fucking tear out, dude. And it's like, yeah, dude, you can make really sick tear out with really sick FM sounds. Obvi, bruh. You know, you can make something really, really inharmonic, meaning not at a defined root note pitch. High pass it, drop a sub under it, rhythm. Calculated. GG. Alright, so like, there's a lot of shit to do in here. Best way to go and kind of do it is to get your feet wet. Just start doing it. Again, everything should be very self-explanatory. These we already talked about. Again, FFT, this is literally what we did to I just imported a preset that doesn't import as audio. I can actually go and drag a JPEG, and this is that kind of good shit. So I got a bunch of let's see here. Ugh. Alright, so it's trying to see, like, it wants to see a JPEG. So let's give it a JPEG. I believe this is a PNG. No, it is a JPEG. Let's try it again. Alright. Alright, so I'm going to drop this into FFT here. Remember, FFT 256, 2048 is talking about time. It doesn't want to do it right now. There's a couple things that are just like not working for me right now. This shit should be working. Oh well. Well, anyways, you know, I kind of like just leave the kitty up there. Does DC cause phase issues? No. Wait, he's saying it does? I mean, I guess if you're running it on your entire master, it shouldn't. Literally, DC offset is 4-phase issues. So, kind of goes against the way I've learned that whole concept in general. But yes, it can. There's like always exceptions to the rule, you know. Like say if there is like a ton of information at the low end. I don't know why it's not working right now. I literally made like some weird. Maybe it actually does need to be a PNG. But yeah, like some things just don't work super consistently. Like I was saying about like what oversampling does with you know, just trying to get like the most accurate representation of what's going on in the sound. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to kind of tell what is going to happen unless you're able to recognize when it does happen. So then you can say, oh, well, you know, I have had phase issues with this. And it's not always the case, for sure. What, I just really did that. Yeah, so it's not always the case. It's just you really have to be able to recognize when phase issues are happening, recognize what phase sounds like, and, you know, be able to kind of nip it in the bud. Right there, that's where it says "ag." Alright, so that's a ton of shit, and I did kind of get through everything I wanted to talk about, you know, within a reasonable amount of time here. It's a lot of shit. We did kind of talk about the mod matrix. Really here, just to kind of like make sure that you're not in the dark about a couple things, because we have talked about the mod matrix a ton already. So it should be kind of like review in a couple ways. Let me tell you a couple hotkeys before we dip out here. Oh, actually,